Welcome to the Green Nurse Podcast, where we bring hope and inspiration for growth and healing. We are here to change the dialogue and stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. We have a little video that we show, but we're going to show it a little bit later in an addendum to the podcast. We had some technical difficulties, but really grateful to be here. My name is Sherry Tuckus, and I'm a registered nurse, a patient advocate activist, and I'm here to be one of those game changers. Our platform here in the nursing space is to educate and empower patients to live a better quality of life, to make choices that are best for them. And I've been a pediatric nurse working in home infusion, doing home chemotherapy with kids who have had cancer, who were debilitated by pills, procedures, and with side effects, which could have been mitigated by cannabinoids and other plant medicines. And a lot of these kids were not given that option. And so it is truly time for conventional care to wake up and to see cannabis and other progressive therapies as medicine, and how this may support other therapeutic therapies and conventional therapy. As a mom with a child with a rare genetic disorder, I know what it's like to go to the end of the world for your child. You will do anything to help your child, no matter what. So very, very excited to introduce my guest today, Tracy Ryan. Just going to pull up these slides here. And so this is just going to be an amazing show. So Tracy Ryan, who is the co-founder of NKore Bio Therapeutics, there's information in that in the comment section, and Chief Communications Officer, and also the founder of SavingSophie.org. Her daughter's journey with cancer has led to the groundbreaking cancer therapies that we will soon have available for humans. And today she's going to share her story about Sophie and their journey. So welcome, Tracy. Really grateful to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sherry. It's a real honor to be here. And happy holidays.
Oh, thank you. You know, your story is so important, to people. You know, I've been a nurse for a really long time, for 30 years, did pediatric nursing for over 10 years in Children's Hospital in Boston, and have worked, in the home space, caring for kids, actually administering chemotherapy, doing home infusions, doing IVs, doing pain management at home with these kids. And I've seen these kids in the conventional system not having plant medicine. And now as a cannabis nurse, working with these same patients in a different setting at home, and just seeing the significant improvement in how the therapies work, also mitigating side effects, improving quality of life, and giving comfort to family. So, it's really, really important. I want to have you start sharing just a little bit about, your daughter's journey with cannabis and how it all began. And then we're going to go through a series of some very, very interesting slides. So tell us all about Sophie.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you for all the work that you've done to help the children. It is nurses that are our heroes and have gotten us through this almost 10-year journey, which is about how long we've been battling this disease with Sophie. At just 8.5 months old, she was diagnosed with a very rare low-grade brain tumor called an optic pathway glioma. And these tumors traditionally have a 90 to 95% survival rate, so there's not really any research going on with these diseases because they're considered survivable, but there's an 80 to 85% recurrence rate. Hence the reason Sophie has been battling this, as you can see in the photos, since she was a little baby. It was a couple weeks, I don't know. It's been almost 10 years, so my mind's a little blurry on it. But shortly after Sophie's diagnosis, we were put in touch with the former talk show host and celebrity Ricki Lake and her producing partner, Abby Epstein. And these women are documentary filmmakers that have made some incredible films like The Business of Being Born. And they have a real focus on women and families and healthcare. And they came to me and they said, listen, we heard about your daughter and we wanted to let you know that we're doing this new documentary. It's now on Netflix called Weed the People. And it was they were using medical cannabis. Sorry, do you have a question, Sherry?
No. I'm just writing that down for our viewers.
Yes. People on Netflix. And it's about using medical cannabis for pediatric disease. And Ricki and Abby shared a lot of research that was going on and other anecdotal stories of children using cannabis with brain tumors that were seeing great success. And after talking to her oncologist, they said, listen, we don't see any reason why this would be harmful or would be an issue for your daughter to take this medicine. So we're happy to support you. So at 9 months old, on camera, Sophie took her first dose of cannabis, and yes, there was THC in it. And THC is a very, very, very important component of this plant, and one in which we have discovered its importance through our research, which we'll talk about more later. This discovery in what we saw in Sophie when we were watching her on this plant, when we were watching the side effects of the chemotherapy be mitigated, when we watched her immune system not be completely just leveled like so many of the other children that she was in treatment alongside. We watched her bone marrow literally repair itself. She needed like many, many blood transfusions up until about 9 months into her chemotherapy in the beginning of her journey. And she just stopped needing blood transfusions, what the doctors couldn't explain. And the tumor was shrinking in ways that they had not seen before. So they were really convinced that this plant was doing something quite exceptional. And so were we, because not only were we seeing these effects in Sophie, but we were also connected to many other patients through social media, especially moms and dads with children who were battling cancer. And they too were seeing these same effects. So that's when my husband and I took a look at this and we're like, okay, maybe this all really happened to us for a very special reason. And maybe Sophie has this message and we're her messengers. And this is something that the world needs to know about, because chemotherapy for children is not only just extremely toxic, it's very antiquated and outdated. There's been very, very, very few therapies, like 4 or 5, I think, maybe brought to market in the last 40 years, and that's it. And up until recently, only 3.8% of all government funding was even going to pediatric cancer research through the Pediatric Cancer Caucus led by Congressman Michael McCall out of Austin, Texas. That has now gone up to 8%. And I'm, become dear friends with him and the whole community that surrounds him that's really pushing for more research to be done with children. So that's when we started our former company, Cannabis. And through Cannabis, we worked with patients with our medical tinctures here in California, but we guided patients all over the world. And I then began really jumping headfirst into advocacy and was doing anywhere from 50 to 60 speaking engagements a year on a global scale. And I just couldn't believe how much I was learning and understanding about this plant, how much the science was evolving, and just also what it was doing to patients, not with just cancer, but as a whole: autism, epilepsy, PTSD. I mean, what we saw in war vets with extreme PTSD in the use of this plant, and then being able to get off of sometimes, a couple dozen medications was profound. And then I got involved in work with DC and at the Capitol. And as you can see, I've met with the president a couple of times this year. We've been to the White House 3 times. I've been working with high-ranking members of Congress, and we've been really trying to advance not only the understanding around cannabis, but also now our immunotherapy. And that's where the landed me, was in cancer immunotherapy, where I am today.
Excellent. And I cannot wait to dive into that, because these next coming slides that we're about to show are going to blow you away. But I want to kind of get back to, because I do take care of a lot of kids. Like I said, I'm a pediatric nurse. I have a lot of children that we've taken care of. Actually, I'm just going to pull up one little slide here for you. And this is a slide, and this is just a really interesting statistic that I want you all to see really quickly. So according to the cancer.org statistics, about 10,470 children in the United States under the age of 15 will be diagnosed with cancer this year. That's in 2022. That's a lot. Childhood cancer rates have been rising for the past few decades. And there have been, as Tracy said, major treatment advances and desperate parents that are looking for all options to help their children. And so this was a picture of a little girl that I've been taking care of probably for the past 5 years. And she had a glioblastoma. And basically through the course of a year and a half, she had seizures, the whole gamut, chemo, radiation, it wasn't working. And then once she started to include cannabis, the conventional treatment started to work. And currently she has no evidence of disease, no seizures, and she's off of seizure medication. And so the reason why I bring this up, because Tracy, you've been doing this with kids for a while, probably longer than I have, in the cannabis nursing space. And so what's really important for parents and what they want to know is, what types of cannabinoids did you use? What part of the plant? I know you said THC, but did you use other minor cannabinoids? What were the routes of administration? And how did you start dosing her? These are questions that parents will ask all the time. They get really, really scared. And so as a parent who's been using cannabis with your child for a while now, I think it'll be really impactful for them to hear it from you.
First of all, I'm a big believer in whole plant when you're using cannabis that you get on the state level from dispensaries. We really have had to throw the kitchen sink at Sophie because unfortunately her tumor has such a high recurrence rate. She ended up ultimately failing 7 chemos and clinical trials. And we'll get into why that happened later, because we now know why these therapies weren't working and why cannabis was in fact not eradicating her disease. Whereas with so many other neck down cancers, I've seen incredible results. And we now understand why that's happening with brain cancer specifically. But for Sophie, we originally had guidance through other practitioners that had been in the space. They'd never dosed children before, but they had worked with adults. So we started out very, very low with Sophie with both THC and CBD, whole plant. We originally started with the very, very thick fico oil. We moved to tinctures because dosing with the really thick oil is very, very challenging. It's very easy to overdose because it's so highly concentrated. I mean, we were literally having to use a jewelry scale and having to put a little tip of it on wax paper and then weigh it and then put it on her pacifier. And it was never consistent dosing. So it was really, really challenging. And the last thing you ever want to do is overdose a child, especially an infant. So we were very, very careful and started off with the fecal oil with something the size of a period. Literally, that's how small the dose was. And because, again, it's so highly concentrated. And then throughout the process, we stayed on the same protocol pretty much consistently with Sophie. If I'm not mistaken, it was a 1-to-1. Again, this was like 10 years ago, and we've changed so many different times and really just tried to follow the disease. And we've had to change strains many times because what we had seen with with her tumor is that it would work really, really well at first. And the tumor, because it's slow growing and the chemo can't get rid of it, the tumor has an opportunity to mutate and get smart and figure out how to work around these other therapies and continue to evade the immune system. And what we ended up discovering through Sophie was that she had no functioning natural killer cells in her brain, which is now our field of study and what our lead therapeutic is in. So to explain natural killer cells briefly, they are the main driver of your immune system. So if you think about the general in the marching army, that's your natural killer cells. And the natural killer cells regulate stem cells in all of your different organs. So for example, if you have some stem cells in the liver and they start to act up and they start to try and mutate into cancer cells, because we all have cancer stem cells in our body, the natural killer cells are the ones that come in and destroy those cells and keep them from actually turning into cancer. And it is my business partner, Dr. Anahit Jewett, 30 years of work that she's published on many, many times, where she has proven that it is the failure of this system that causes you to get cancer in the first place. So if you have a functioning natural killer cell system, cancer cannot give rise in the body. Well, Sophie had none of these cells in her brain, which is why we're finding that the cannabis was working okay. It was boosting her T cells, and T cells also play a significant role in killing cancer. But unfortunately, without the natural killer cells, the T cells can only do so much. So the T cells were doing a good job of killing the disease, but unfortunately, they could only take it so far, and then the disease would come back. So, as we continue working with Sophie now, she still is on cannabinoids. We have discovered that cannabis is a booster to the natural killer cell system naturally, which is the only thing Dr. Jewett has ever discovered is a natural activator that comes from the earth. IL-2 is another form of drug that is used in immunotherapy that makes patients quite sick. But it is what is being used to boost immunotherapy. And we have found in our research that the cannabinoid that we're using was boosting the natural killer cells as well as the IL-2. So we've continued to use this in Sophie now that she has received a natural killer cell treatment. And we've got her on about 270 milligrams of CBD a day and about 75 milligrams of THC. We've also used THCA in the past. And I really believe in the secondary and tertiary cannabinoids, your CBGs, your CBDAs, your CBDVs, and also the terpene profiles can be also very, very important. And that's why it is my opinion and the opinion of all of my colleagues that you should never get dosing from social media, that you should use a medical professional who truly understands not just the plant, but also the other medications that the patient is on at that time. Because, for example, with immunotherapies, not natural killer cell immunotherapy specifically, but with T-cell therapies and other immunotherapies out there today, cannabis can actually be quite counteractive to those treatments and can mitigate their efficacy. Whereas with chemotherapies, it can actually boost the efficacy quite substantially. So that's why, and I personally give dosing guidance. I will communicate with people what I've given to my own child, but every patient is individual and every patient is on different medications that are supportive of the chemotherapies or antibiotics, or, Bactrim, for example, if you have chemotherapy in place for immune function, and you have to be cognizant of those different agents and how they work within the body.
Yeah. And so that's what we same here as nurses, as clinical nurses, when we're working with families, we actually reach out to the oncologists and the team of providers if they're open to hearing from us and how we can incorporate cannabis, whole plant medicine in conjunction to the conventional treatments, including immunotherapy, and then just altering dosing depending upon the days that they receive that. So it does require a collaborative approach. It does require people being able to open up their mouth and to speak in behalf of their child and to advocate for your child and to bring in a clinician that isn't afraid to speak to these providers, because and nurses were not, because nurses are always interacting with doctors all the time and even challenging them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a healthy interaction between nurse and doctor. And that's what we're here to do as nurses. So I want to get back into some of these slides because, well, one of the things too, we did talk about, what made you make the switch from cannabis to immunotherapy, but did you stop it altogether or did you use it a little bit in conjunction? Because we know that sometimes cannabis can boost immune cells. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious as to how the path that you took switching over.
We've never stopped cannabis. We've discovered that cannabis is an incredible booster of the natural killer cells, which is our main defense against cancer. With Sophie, unfortunately, she just didn't have any natural killer cells in her brain to boost. And we learned that after she had a brain surgery in 2020 and a cyst formed in the pocket where they extracted the disease, which if you look at the images that you just pulled up, Sherry, on the left-hand side of her brain scan, there's a big empty hole there. Well, originally there was a smaller pocket there from a previous surgery in 2018, which filled up with cystic fluid that we were able to drain. And I apologize, I said the wrong date earlier. I originally said 2020. The surgery was actually 2018. And it was in 2018 that we found no functioning natural killer cells in Sophie's brain, which was that aha moment for us. Because when my business partner looked at Sophie's natural killer cell function, and she did what's called a functional assay on it, so she truly understood how they were working, which is unlike a lot of the natural killer cell diagnostics that are available today. NKore, my company, now is going to be bringing this suite of diagnostics to market. We understand the immune system in ways that conventional medicine doesn't have the tools in which to look at it. So we were able to see that the cells in Sophie's brain were functioning properly, but that there's no natural killer cells to boost. So we're like, okay, this makes sense. But from the neck down, when we looked at Sophie's blood, her immune function was functioning 5x better than any healthy adult Dr. Jewett studied in 30 years. Now, this was impossible because Sophie was 6. She should have had an immature immune system. She was on 4 chemotherapies. TPCV was the protocol she was doing, and she had a brain tumor, which to my business partner made absolutely zero sense because any patients that she studied, their immune function is malfunction, not functioning above human levels, where she literally looks like she's, got superhuman immune powers, which made sense as to why she healed from brain surgeries unlike any other child her surgeons had ever seen. It made sense as to why she was so healthy, why her immune system bounced back so quickly after chemotherapy, or why her cells didn't plummet at all. Like, all these pieces started to fit together. So we truly understood that the cannabinoids were a crucial part to her not only being healthy, but staying healthy. And when we discovered that there were no natural killer cells, we then knew that until we fixed that problem, the cannabis didn't have anything to boost in there other than the T cells, which as I mentioned earlier, the T cells are only going to do so much. So we knew we had to get functioning natural killer cells into Sophie's brain.
There we go.
That discovery, and that discovery with Sophie's blood and her immune function is what led Dr. Jewett and I to become business partners, and what led us to study 29 more patients that were then consuming our Canna Kids oil, that were in all varying stages of disease, all different ages, from young to the elderly, from terminal to, you know, low grade, and everything in between. And 100% across the board, we saw the same thing in every single patient. Natural killer cell function was returning.
There you go.
So this is where our worlds collided, and we're like, okay, what are the chances that me as a mother could find you as a doctor and a research scientist, who not only is probably the only human being on the face of the planet that could have discovered why Sophie had this brain tumor, truly at a cellular level, what had malfunctioned? Because, you know, again, she'd been in treatment for almost 6 years at this point, 5.5, sorry, to be accurate, 5.5 years. And no doctor had ever discovered this. No matter how many genetic tests they had done, the fluid they studied from her brain tumor tissue, no one had ever figured this out. So what are the odds that I'm going to land in this woman's lap, and our paths and the different therapeutics that we're studying completely converge? So I knew that I was onto something. I'm like, all right, this is the path that I've been meant to walk in, to walk on this entire time.
And I just want to say thank you for walking that path for so many different patients. Let's go through these slides here, because I think it's really, really important for people just to see how powerful cannabis and these NK cell therapies are. So we went through this slide a little bit already, didn't we, Tracy? We just talked about your daughter and the progression, the protocol, and the results. All right, cool.
Yes,
Let's go into
absolutely.
this one here.
So what you're looking at here, let's start with the bottom row, which says May 21st, 2021. And just for the audience, because I know a lot of people aren't used to looking at brain scans, not only are these images reversed, because the way that you're actually looking at them, if you can imagine looking up from the bottom of Sophie's chin and going upwards. So really the left is the right, the right is the left. But also this is like looking at a layered cake. So if you're starting at the bottom, this is the first slice, the next slice, the next slice, the next slice, the next slice. So you're looking at different slices within her brain. So everyone understands kind of what this visual is. And if you look at May 21st, 2021, this was before Sophie had any natural killer cell infusions. And if you look at number 3 image, you'll see the heaviest concentration of this white glowing kind of chunkiness that's in an upside down V formation. That's the disease. In slides 1 and 2, that big empty space over to the left is where they resected brain and disease. They actually had to remove a small part of Sophie's brain tissue that was damaged and no longer functioning properly, that was causing seizures. And she also had to have a big cyst and disease resected in 2020 that unfortunately led to a left-hand side disability that we're now working to correct with surgeries. Then the other component that I want to point out that's most easy to see on slide 6 and 7 and 8, there's a kind of a circular object there, and that's a cystic component where there is fluid. So May 21st is before any natural killer cell infusions. And I want to talk about this therapy a little bit before I talk more about what we've seen. We actually harvested my husband's natural killer cells. So it's pretty incredible that we now believe that my daughter's cure has been walking and standing next to her and breathing, living next to her entire life by the way of my husband's immune cells. And we used his cells instead of mine because by nature, men have a higher natural killer cell function. And my husband's was extremely high. Not only was it extremely high, but they had the highest collection of natural killer cells in 13 years. And they had harvested cells from NBA basketball players. And that is because my husband was not only on cannabis, but also on a probiotic that my business partner developed for the treatment of cancer. And his we got 4 bags of therapy where most harvesting processes result in 1 to 2. And the process is called apheresis. It's a lot like dialysis. They actually removed all of his blood from his body 3 times, not all at once, of course, but that's how many times his blood cycled through this machine. And we took all the good stuff out instead of like with dialysis where you take all the bad stuff out. And we went through an activation process. And the treatment that we're going to be administering to patients is exactly the same as this, except for we're switching out the activated natural killer cells with supercharged natural killer cells, which are the cells that our company has the patent to and are in the final stages of manufacturing with our large scale manufacturer currently. The difference between an activated natural killer cell and a supercharged natural killer cell would be like getting in the boxing ring with a human versus the Hulk. They are like activated on lots and lots and lots of steroids. And in all of our research have been shown to be 10x more effective than what Sophie actually received. The reason she didn't get our supercharged cells is because those actually require FDA approval, because we are changing the cell. We're not changing the DNA of the cell, but we are supercharging and creating this whole new cell that's never existed before. But the body also still sees it as a natural part of its body, of the human body. And unlike T cells, you do not need a perfect match. You don't have to worry about graft versus host or a cytokine storm where the immune system is literally turning on itself. You do not have to worry about death. It is impossible to die from receiving natural killer cells. And they work to fix the core problem of why the patient actually got cancer in the first place, which is a broken natural killer cell system. So my daughter received 2 infusions. The first one was in September of 2021, and the last one was over last Christmas break. If we jump back to the slide, and that we're looking at right here, Sherry, you'll see May 23rd, 2022, you're already seeing a reduction in the disease. And for the audience, the easiest area for me to point out to you is if you're looking at that upside down V, on the very, very bottom right-hand side of that upside down V, there's a kind of round little bulbous area. And if you look at May 23rd, that area is gone. And even if you look at slide 6, you can really see more easily that chunky part over to the right. It's just not there anymore. There's a tiny little bitty hint. Then we jump to 3 months later. Again, still no more therapy since December, using cannabis and this probiotic to continue to boost these cells. We're seeing even more destruction. And it's really, really clear now that this therapy is working and working very, very well. And then we had another another MRI on the 21st, was that last week? I think it was. My days are running together, but like 2 weeks ago. And we're November seeing 21st. Further destruction. Yes, 11 months after treatment, and the tumor is still dying. We do have a little bit of a hiccup right now that I want to be completely transparent about. The cyst did get a little bit bigger. Now, the team believes that the reason the cyst has grown in size is because of an immune response. The truth is we really don't know. We're actually going to go in and remove the cyst because it's a very, very easy access point through that big empty space in her brain. The cyst is butted up right against it. And in order to ensure that Sophie doesn't have any further damage due to this cyst or potential seizures or any other further disabilities, we're going to take that sucker out on the 13th through a very, very easy procedure through the side of her temple. So with that cyst being gone, we'll not only be able to get the fluid and any type of disease that's attached to it that they're able to extract, we'll be able to study that fluid and we'll be able to study the tissue and we'll be able to really, really, truly understand at an extremely high level what is going on inside of Sophie's brain. Now, I do think she may possibly require one more infusion. She has lived an 11-month life with no treatment, healthier than she's ever been, back in school. She had a total of 16 days of treatment. And there was only 7 of those days where she didn't feel well. And that was from the IL-2, which I had mentioned earlier. We're hopeful in the future to replace with our cannabinoid medicine that we're developing right now that we hope to have into the manufacturing stage. I'm hoping by the middle of next year sometime that we can use as an adjunct to this therapy, because our goal truly is to have a 360-degree approach that's non-toxic to the patient. But can you imagine only 7 days of feeling icky out of an entire treatment and getting these kinds of results in an incurable brain tumor that does not ever go away with chemotherapy that she was doomed to have inside of her brain for the rest of her life? It's pretty significant.
It's extremely significant. So I like this one as well because this shows, let's go over this slide really quickly for the viewers that are just tuning in. We're talking about pediatric
Absolutely.
cancer, cannabis, and NK cell therapy. And so this is Sophie's brain, MRI images, right? She had incurable optic pathway glioma. That's pretty significant. So take a peek at these slides here. Tracy, you want to just do a quick review and then we'll go on to the next one.
Absolutely. So again, with this type of tumor, chemotherapy can't get rid of it. These are slow growing tumors. Chemo can only see cells when they're dividing, and they don't divide that often. So the true goal of chemotherapy is to arrest the development of the disease and get it to stop growing. As I mentioned previously, Sophie failed 7 different chemos in clinical trials and was really starting to run out of options when this natural killer cell therapy that was an activated NK cell therapy became available to us through a collaboration that my business partner was involved in, that she helped develop the protocol for Sophie specifically. And what we've seen after only 2 infusions, again, the first one was in September of 2021. The second one was in December of 2021. We have seen an extraordinarily reduction in disease without any further treatment, 11 months off of treatment. The top image, as a recap, represents Sophie's disease prior to any natural killer cell treatments that we used in combination with cannabis and a probiotic that my business partner developed for cancer. And the bottom scan is now the result that we're seeing today, where the disease is almost gone. Once again, 11 months without any treatment. Last Christmas was the last infusion. She is absolutely thriving. She at one point had the highest recorded immune system in pediatric scientific history. Her vision starting to return. She's walking and playing and running. Her disabilities are getting better and better. She just had an arm surgery to correct the disability from a cyst that was growing deep in her brain that was removed in 2020. And she's just absolutely never been healthier. And the reason that this therapy is working is because we fixed what was wrong with her brain, which was the absence of natural killer cells. We used my husband's cells, we infused them into her body, and we are now seeing an incredible response. And we do soon believe that Sophie will be cancer-free. When that happens, she will make history. These tumors have never been eradicated with a treatment. The only time we've ever seen this type of disease go away is if the patient has NF1 or neurofibromatosis 1, which is a genetic mutation, which my daughter does not have. She was doomed to have this tumor inside of her brain the rest of her life.
Here we go. And here's another study. So this isn't just all about Sophie. This is being used all over the world. This is a Chinese study, clinical trial collaboration in China. Let's review this slide. I hope this is making an impact on you guys. Seriously, we need people to start learning about all of these other different ways of treating these chronic debilitating illnesses that literally people die from. You know, cancer is just horrible. Like I said, I've been a cancer oncology nurse doing chemo in the home, hospice care as well. And, you know, we need to have other options. So let's review this slide with the supercharged NK cells, the human trial, and the data point. So this slide is really powerful.
So we unfortunately only have 1 human patient that was treated through this collaboration because unfortunately that's when COVID happened and all of the clinical trials were shut down at that point and relations with China went a bit sideways. So we decided to back out of moving further and have now moved, which I'll talk about in a minute, to working on not only getting approval here in the United States, but in other countries as well. So this was a gentleman who had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And in the top picture, you can see there's a lot of redness and swelling in his mouth. And the arrow is pointing to a hole that's literally in the roof of his mouth where the disease was protruding through the roof of his mouth towards his brain in a telescoping fashion. This gentleman he didn't receive the preconditioning and post-conditioning like Sophie received with her activated natural killer cell. He simply received 1 infusion of my company's supercharged natural killer cell therapeutic. And within 14 days, the bottom image is the result. The lesion had almost completely gone away. All of the redness and inflammation was gone from his mouth. There was no evidence of disease in his blood. And the report that we got 6 months post-treatment was he was, after only 1 infusion, still cancer-free. His side effects were, he felt better. He could eat again. He could sleep. He had tons of energy, and he was ready to take on the world. So again, with the one infusion of the natural killer cells, the only negative side effect that he saw was a high fever for a few hours, mitigated by Tylenol, which was simply the immune system turning on and revving up. It wasn't toxicity that was actually happening within the body. We are now in the process of going through an approval through Ministry of Health in another country. The application has been submitted, and the hope is to treat a small number of patients using the FDA, an FDA program that they established in 1996, where it's called the 312.101 program, where they will, if you follow a specific set of criteria, one being having your therapeutics manufactured in a CGMP facility that stands for Considered Good Manufacturing Practices. That's a clean room environment where all FDA drugs are an environment in which all FDA drugs are approved that you receive in treatment today, meaning they're exceptionally clean. There's no contamination whatsoever. We're going to be using those types of therapeutics. We will be cryogenically freezing them, shipping them to the other country, and then infusing them into patients with all different kinds of disease, both solid tumors and liquid, meaning blood cancers, high grade and low grade, 6 years of age and up. This is going to be a small study. With that study, we are going to have the ability to use that human data to, we believe, fast track our approval process here in the United States. And we're optimistic that we will get breakthrough therapy designation, which means that we just get to market a whole lot faster and we get to jump over a lot of these hurdles, because we believe that the safety, which is what the FDA cares most about, is not only going to be there, it's going to be one of, if not the most safe therapeutic on the market today for cancer. So we have a really exciting road ahead of us. We need to raise a lot of capital in the interim. So for all of you out there that want to help us on this mission, please get in touch with me. This is an incredible path that we have mapped out, and one that we expect to be starting very, very soon in 2023.
Yeah. Ugh, amazing. And then cannabinoid therapy. So we, like we had talked about, the cannabis was therapeutic in helping to boost the NK cell therapy. So let's review this slide for our viewers.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to mention is that we originally studied the blood of 29 patients, which I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. And they were consuming my former company's Cannabis oils. I had to sell Cannabis because I can't work with the FDA and own a federally illegal company because it's still considered a Schedule I narcotic. So what we found in these patients was extremely incredible. We saw that their natural killer cell function, which is your main defense against cancer, and when that system fails is why you get cancer, we saw that system turning back on and beginning to work. And in patients that were off treatment and had otherwise been deemed terminal, we saw that their immune function was way above any type of normal human levels, like we had seen in my daughter Sophie's immune function. We then reverse engineered those findings in a humanized mouse model. I want to mention the humanized mice and just explain those a little bit, because this is not your typical mouse model that you see science done in today. Because when you use a standard immunocompromised mouse model, there's still an 80 to 85% failure rate when going from mouse research to humans, because there's just so much genetic difference. With a humanized mouse model, Dr. Jewett, my business partner, believes that this is absolutely the best platform that can be used today. And what happens is, through a special process, these mice are prepared with human tissue and an injection of CD34 into the tail vein, which after 6 weeks reconstitutes the immune system of the mouse, where their immune system is almost identical to that of a human being. There's only one level in the mouse's immune system that is off and that isn't identically parallel to that of a human being. And that actually makes them more representative of a cancer patient. So it's not a bad thing. They pump human blood. Their immune system is almost identical to that of a human being, and they have the same blood-brain barrier as a human. So due to the fact that we were not able to bring real-world cannabis into the lab due to these federal restrictions, we used a synthetic cannabinoid. And the synthetic cannabinoid proved to be quite significant in not only its ability to boost the natural killer cell function, but we also discovered that it was attacking and killing cancer stem cells, the seeds to cancer that chemo and radiation cannot even see. And it's these cancer stem cells that are left behind after chemo and radiation that causes recurrence. And this synthetic was identifying them and eliminating them. So we've now gone back to the lab and using another type of process. Dr. Jewett is working with different proteins from the body to boost the efficacy of the synthetic cannabinoid by 1,100-fold than what we originally saw in our initial research. So it can become even more efficacious. We also didn't see any toxicity or side effects in the mouse model. And this synthetic works in the immune system as what's called a receptor agonist, which is how THC works. It turns the immune system, or turns the endocannabinoid system on. And by turning that system on, we're boosting the natural killer cells and we're attacking and killing disease, which now makes so much sense to me, Sherry, as to why this works for so many other diseases. We've spoken today specifically about cancer. But when you're talking about fixing the human immune system, it's not just cancer. It's autoimmune diseases. It's viruses like COVID. It's many different things out there that this could potentially be a really, really great option for. We're going to start with cancer, see where that takes us, prove out our theories in humans. We're going to be working towards creating this synthetic cannabinoid and boosting its efficacy and getting that into manufacturing as soon as possible, using that as an adjunct to the natural toxicity and really either of these therapies, and then opening that up hopefully to the world over the next few years, starting with cancer as a treatment. What you're looking at, Sherry, is the amount of cell death that we saw, the percentage of cell death when studying this synthetic cannabinoid against cancer. And we came to the right amount. If you look at the very, very last bar where it says 155, 75 picometers, look at the level at which the death is occurring. It just skyrocketed once we found that right dose within our studies. We saw it inhibiting the growth of the cancer stem cells. We saw we now believe that this is definitely a really great tool in inducing apoptosis or cell death in cancer cells. We were using it as a treatment for undifferentiated cancers, as you'll see here, to induce apoptosis. Undifferentiated or poorly differentiated means aggressive cancer. My daughter's is well differentiated or a low-grade cancer, meaning it doesn't metastasize to other parts of the body. So we're very excited about these results and just the continued convergence of my world and Dr. Jewett's world and how they're working so harmoniously together.
Amazing, amazing. And for our new viewers that are new to cannabis as medicine, when we're talking about cannabinoids are molecules that interact with the endocannabinoid system. And so there's three different types. There's endocannabinoids that we make, anandamide, 2-AG, and others. There's plant phytocannabinoids that the cannabis plant makes. THC, CBD are the most abundant. We have the minor cannabinoids. And then we have the synthetic cannabinoids that the pharmaceutical companies are making. They are all helpful. They all have therapeutic potential. They all have their place in cannabis medicine and as well as in conventional care. And so we're just really starting to scratch the tip of the iceberg, or we're still standing on it as we continue to evolve. So this slide here is a very intense slide. I love this slide. I got this on your website, which is also written in the comments below. And this just really demonstrates the intricacy and the in-depth and the complexity of how we need to work with patients when we're killing cancer cells. It's just not the one-size-fits-all approach. It's multiple modalities. Just like Tracy said, we want to hit this from 360 degrees, all angles. And so this just shows the example of the different types of receptors that are involved in the different types of cancers, as well as ceranamide synthesis. Ceranamide has been known to induce the apoptosis, which causes the cancer cell to die. And then there's other processes, like Tracy had said. We have T cells, we have autophagy, we have the NK killer cells as well. So this slide just goes to show how important it is for you to reach out to clinicians if you're going to embark upon a journey using plant medicines, progressive tools, including conventional care. So this is just a great slide just to show how deep it is. And there's a lot more behind this as well. And so then, well, we're going to just finish up here. I've got a few more questions before we do our little promotions. So just quick question. Is the National Cancer Institute supportive of your research, and do they recognize your work?
Absolutely. We've met with them before. We've also met with President Biden's Moonshot Initiative team, who's now looking at cannabis. And as you know, Biden has pushed forward a bill making cannabis research much easier. And he's also letting people out of prison at a federal level that have these minor cannabis convictions. So this administration has been extremely supportive. National Cancer Institute as well, NIH. They're all very, very excited about not just the natural killer cells, but also our advancements in our cannabinoid research. And the one thing that I do want to mention is that the synthetic cannabinoid that we have been using, the body sees it as a natural cannabinoid as well. And we actually saw it activating a third receptor outside of the CB1 and CB2. So there are other receptors that have yet to be fully discovered and identified, which is something that we're working on doing now. So we're really just starting to crack the surface of what the potential benefits of these medicines are. But the government as a whole has been exceptionally supportive. As I mentioned, I've been working very closely on both sides of the aisle with high-ranking members of Congress. Adam Schiff's team, Congressman Eric Swalwell, who's been a dear friend for like 7 years now, has been extremely supportive over the years. On the Republican side, Congressman Michael McCall out of Texas, who's the head of the Pediatric Cancer Caucus. I speak to him sometimes almost weekly about what we're doing and the advancements that we're making. And he's really trying to help bring other people into the fold that can be supportive, other hospitals, MD Anderson being one of them, who's very excited about the research that we're doing. So yeah, I mean, anytime that you can bring a therapy forward that not only isn't going to kill you, but is showing such high levels of efficacy in preclinical models and our humanized mice, in my daughter and in our patient in Beijing with a safety profile like what we have, it's getting everyone really excited. So we can't wait to get into humans through our, they call it OUS studies, outside of the US studies, and see what the results are going to be, because we're very optimistic that we've got a real shot at changing the game when it comes to how cancer is treated today, and the fear that patients have around cancer, and what that all entails as far as, what the family's going to go through and what the patient's going to go through.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap up the show, and I just want you to talk a little bit more about your company. So you have built a team
Yes.
that is extraordinary, and you guys are doing amazing work. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your team that you've built and when this treatment will be available, and then we'll close out the show.
So I started NKore Bio Therapeutics initially about 4 years ago. And then we switched the structure of the company. So the company that we have now is an LLC, not that that really matters, but it's 2 years old 3 years, March 17th, with my new partners that I currently have. The partners in the company, there's 4 of us. Dr. Anahi Jewett, who developed all these therapies, is an equal partner, as well as Greg Brophy and Tim Brom. Greg and Tim are absolutely brilliant. We call ourselves the 4 pillars because we each have such specialized fields in all of our individual areas. Greg actually led the team that brought the PET scan to market, and the PET scan is the gold standard in imaging for cancer today. He was also a very, very successful attorney. He's worked for many, many different healthcare companies in the medical space. He's still on the board of a company out of Austin that has ligaments that are used in surgeries across the nation, all over, that he was originally the CEO of. Him and my other partner, Tim, have built and exited multiple companies in the medical space for hundreds of millions of dollars. Tim's run a company that was doing $1 billion a year in revenue. He's also, Tim is the inventor of PRP, platelet-rich plasma. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, Kobe Bryant used to get these injections in his knees. It's a stem cell therapy. Vampire facials use PRP. There's all kinds of medical treatments used today that are very, very beneficial for a lot of different ailments and illnesses that PRP can be supportive of. And he's also got about another, I think, 35 or 36 issued patents at this point. He's worked very heavily in placental cell tissues, in regenerating skin from burns, and creating different types of materials that can go over these burns to help burn victims. These guys are brilliant. And then I, of course, am the chief communications officer. I've been a marketing executive for 27 years now. I've been doing marketing, PR, public speaking, graphic design, the whole nine. So I'm also one of the main people in the company that raises capital. That's been one of my biggest roles. The the last few months is bringing in funding for the business to keep everything moving expeditiously and in a really positive way. So it's amazing. I've had a lot of negative experiences in the past working with business partners and with investors and just, out there in the world. Being a woman that's an executive, it's sometimes been kind of challenging for me. I've never loved a team more than my partners that I have today. These guys they've already been wildly successful. They could never work again and they'd be fine. They really, truly care about saving the lives of patients, and Sophie is their number one priority. They will literally do anything to help me save my daughter from any further toxicity or pain. And they just want to then pass these therapies on to other patients that come behind her. So it's an incredible team filled with love and passion. And we really are here for the patients first to help them on their cancer journeys and their health journeys. And as far as anticipating when the therapies are going to be available, unfortunately, with the way that the United States and the FDA works, we don't anticipate having approval for our IND in the US until early 2024, which is again why we're doing these out of the United States trials through the Ministry of Health, where we can get approval much quicker. That's not going to be an open program. There's going to be a limited number of patients that we will be treating, but those findings in those patients are going to lead to incredible discoveries, because we're not going to be just looking at one type of disease like we're forced to do here in the United States. As I had mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at both solid tumors and blood cancers from the ages of 6 and up. And we plan on studying about 50 patients in total. We've already locked in about 12 of those that we've chosen to work with. And we hope to see everything from DIPG, glioblastoma, metastatic breast cancer, metastatic lung cancer, ovarian cancer, and really kind of everything in between, leukemias. We really hope to have a sampling of all of those types of patients that we can show efficacy in, that will then help us to really open those human trials here in the United States much wider and help patients much faster. It is our goal and our mission to move as quick as humanly possible.
Wow. Amazing. And then let's see here. So I just want to remove this one. And, we're wrapping up the show today. I'm extremely grateful that you are on. Like for the new viewers, I've been a pediatric nurse since 2008. And I've also been an oncology nurse, a cannabis nurse since 2014. And just really a proponent on cannabis as medicine. It is medicine. And also a proponent of these new therapies that exist that are very important for people to understand. So upon closing, as you know, we are Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse. And what we have is we have a free network for you all. So the network is amazing. It's run by nurses and pharmacists. And we have a free introductory to cannabis course, a patient portal, support groups. We also have our webcasts, podcasts, and we're putting up new and progressive research. It's off of social media. So that way people that are new, that are scared, that have questions, they can come in and they can learn and they can ask questions privately to the clinicians that are there. So we want to welcome you all to that. The other thing that we have going on is Thanks 25. So all of the programs, but I want to point out the one in particular Elizabeth Mack wrote. Elizabeth Mack is the CEO and founder of Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse. She's written this book called Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach. And a lot of people will say, I don't know if I want to become a coach. Why do I want to become a coach? Well, you need to become a coach because no one knows your body better than you. We have smart bodies. This book is really key and instrumental. And so you can coach yourself to wellness. So back to Elizabeth, who created these programs at Holistic Caring. So Cannabis and Cancer program, Thanks 25 for 25% off. It is a very powerful program that we've been adding new and upcoming research to. I'm probably going to put your story in there, Tracy. It's so powerful, because it is more than just cannabis. Cannabinoid therapeutics is much more than just cannabis because we have an endocannabinoid system that supports all other systems. So if the endocannabinoid system is the most important system in our body, what does it make sense? It makes sense that we take care of that we nourish that with all of those different activities. And so then the other thing that we have going on is, like we said, all of the programs are on sale. We have the free network, free community with nurses, If you go to our website, we have a free 7-page medical cannabis guide, and we also have our marketplace. We're launching our new clinic today. Elizabeth and I have been working very, very hard over the past year to get our global clinic launched. So we have a free nurse line, free discovery call that you can call. So it's 970-404-HOPE or 4673. So you have questions about cannabis as medicine. If you have questions about CBD, if you're new to the plant, if you're scared, if you have nowhere to turn, this is a free nurse line. No hidden agendas. We are going to triage. It's a discovery call, helping to educate you and point you in the right direction. Because not only are we clinical nurses, cannabis nurses, but we're also medical cannabis patients. We've been on the other side of the bed and we know what it's like. So I'm just going to remove that. That's enough advertising for today. And really, really grateful, Tracy. Really grateful to have you here. This will be up on our social media platforms. It's also on YouTube. Please join the network. And I want you all to remember what it's all about. It's about living your best life and helping others do the same. Thank you.